Hello Admirals and welcome back to my channel where I talk to you about Battlefleet Gothic, the space fleet game based in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. In this video I'm going to talk to you about defences. That's a specific thing in Battlefleet Gothic that I've never really mentioned or talked about before, but actually appears in quite a number of scenarios and a number of games. And it's all to do with space stations and defences like that. Blackstone Fortress, for example. And various different sort of defense laser batteries and things like that. But can also, surprisingly, include ships in that list that's considered defenses. So let's have a look at them. What are they? And how do some of them work? And how do you use them in game? Let's have a look at what the game considers to be defenses in the rules. So what are defences in BFG? So defences is a term given to a class of various things, and it's quite eclectic. And in reality, it kind of catches all. It's like a catch-all term that's used for a lot of things that otherwise wouldn't necessarily be classed as like a battleship or a cruiser or something like that, or has kind of a specific role within the game itself. So defences is a term used for things like defense battery lasers that you can have in the game, orbital shipyards and space stations, like this tower in Eldar, Helgenspire. It can include the Blackstone Fortress, for example, which is a defensive model, and the most expensive sort of official model in the game, the Ramillies Class Starfort. This is 175 to 875 points, I believe. So it's the most expensive ship in the game, per se. But it also can include system ships, like these sort of defense monitors. And interestingly, it also includes Hulks. So Ork and Chaos Hulks are classed as defences. And strangely enough, so is a Kroot War Sphere. As I can pull, this is kind of an extended one. So it kind of can bring in space stations, defensive laser batteries, as well as what you would maybe consider to be ships as well. But, Hulks, rocks, things like that. So it's a catch-all kind of thing where something kind of defies conventional classification in the system. Now, crucially, these are all high orbit. These are in the regular game. There are then, when you play the low orbit table in certain scenarios, they have a different set of defenses in that, which I will go to in that particular video. But in this one, we're just going to talk about all of kind of these defenses and kind of the rules. Typically, they all have, because they're so eclectic, they all have very individual rules in many respects. Ork Hulk operates very different to the Ramilies, which operates very different to the Blackstone, and the Blackstone operates very differently to the space stations and orbital docks. And you can have different laser batteries and weapons batteries and ordnance batteries and things like that. And the little system ships all have different weapons as well. But there are some general rules that make sense for all of them. But I won't go into the specific rules for each one, especially the Ramilies, which is kind of crazy, but well worth looking into. So defenses, most commonly you'll come across in certain scenarios. There are specific scenarios that say the defender can spend a certain amount of points, and you're allocated a certain amount of points depending on that scenario on different defenses. Quite often these are going to probably be in the lower points tally for things like weapons battery stations and laser silos. Maybe even up to an orbital dock. You can, in some scenarios, pool points together to get a larger, like an orbital dock or a space station, something like that. But essentially, in those individual scenarios where it calls out defenses, you can spend a certain amount of points, and it will tell you, you can have D6 times 10 spent on defensive points, right, and things like that as part of your ship. Or it will say a quarter of your points can be allocated to defenses, and that's when you can choose from your specific fleet list if you want to have a defense. So these are typically stationary. Some of them are not, like the Ork Hulks or the Hulk or the Kroot. And even sometimes a chaos activated Blackstone can move. So you can see like some of these things can be a little bit funny with rules. But typically they're usually stationary. You place them at the beginning of the game and they operate and you activate them just as you would any other ship. But often they just don't move. Sometimes they do, like I say, like the Blackstone or the Hulk, but sometimes, most of the time, they don't move. They're stationary, they're in a spot, it's a defensive position around, say, a planet or something like that, and you plop them on the table, and away they go. And if they're in range, they're in range, and if they're not, they're not. So typically, most of the time, you're probably going to see these sort of defense laser batteries or silos or something, torpedo silos or something like that. These are some of the really, really old ones that you could order from back in the day, back when Games Workshop had an ordering system. And you can see some of the bits they used. So this is a solid piece of metal that they used. And where's the other one? There's that one. And you can see how they kind of kit bashed it all together to make this thing kind of funny. But typically you will these because the points for these are about 30 to 40 points, give or take. So typically they're the most accessible defense platforms in most fleets. And pretty much all fleets can take them as a defender. Like if you want to put them in, you can do that. It's not difficult. You can do that. There are certain ones like Ork Hulk is thing to an Ork fleet, the Elven Spire is for the Eldar, Blackstone Fortress for Chaos and Imperials, Ramillies for Imperials, and a Tau orbital yard is for Tau, for example. But the laser silos and things like that are generally accessible to most people, same as like Orbital Docks and space stations. Space station is up to 150 points, so that's usually in the normal size sort of style games of about between 1,200 to 1,500 points. You're probably only going to get to about a space station level, so an orbital dock, because they're quite expensive. Now, if you are playing defensively, don't sleep on defense monitors. They're 60 points, but they hit pretty hard. So just keep an eye on the old defense monitors. They're a good little ship and a good little thing to throw into, and because they can move around. They're classed as defenses, but they can move around. And it's only then really in the bigger style games that you're going to probably come across a Blackstone Fortress, and it's a really big game if you're going to be getting a Ramillies. Like I said, that's 800 and I want to say 75 points, I think, from the top of my head. So that's a huge investment of points, and I'll come back to that in a little bit. Now, it's totally up to you if you're playing various scenarios that they have the defenses, but you can also play with defenses in any other scenario, and the rules provide you an opportunity to do that. And typically in the original rules, they suggested that if you have a small planet, you could roll a d6 -2, and that would give you a points value for what you could put around the table. And then it went up, so d6 from -1 for a bigger planet, and then a large planet like just d6 and things like that. So you could, in the rules, and the original rules in the original book, it's 140, and you can then add in defensive like silos and orbital docks and things like to allow you to play with these models. So even if the specific scenario doesn't allow for these, you can then roll on it and see if there's a defense sort of couple of points there, here and there for it. So that was one method, but also an additional method they put in there to kind of make it more straightforward, I suppose, was that if you have planets and you need a defender, no max than 4 defensive items for a small planet, no more than 5 if it was a medium planet, and no more than 6 if it was a large planet. And then you would spend your points from the actual game on those items if you wished. So that was another kind of method that they to allow you to play with defenses if you want, regardless of the scenario. And the FAQ then clarified that a little bit more and said that when desired, the defender in a scenario can spend up to 1/3 of their allocated points on planetary defenses, in addition to any defenses that's allowed as part of the scenario you're playing. So that's in addition, which is important. So you can have what the scenario says, and then you can spend up to a third of your points then on additional defenses. So a couple of methods you can use is 3 to bring defenses into your games to make them realistically. I would say none of these are overly competitive, but certainly add a significant amount of narrative to your games. Now, a couple of critical rules things for defenses. Firstly, if they have 1 hit point, like these little laser torpedo silos, you can squadron them in groups. So you can put them on the table base to base if you want, or just together, and you can squadron, so then they can fire together as a single squadron, like if you did an escort squadron. So that's one set of rules. If they have 1 hit point, you can squadron them. Now, ships and really space stations, defenses and things like that, you don't roll on their leadership like you would other ships. They have a flat 7 leadership across the board, not including the crew or the Ramillies or the Ork rocks and stuff. They have their own rules for that. But system ships and defenses, flat 7, which means they don't do orders, except they can do 2 orders. They can do brace for impact, because everything can, so anything can do brace for impact. And if they have ordnance, they can try and reload their ordnance. So if you have torpedo batteries on these, then they can try and reload. It's not a one and done situation. And if they're being fired at, they can brace for impact. They can, batten down the hatches like any other ship or structure in the game, and they can also brace for impact. But other rules like lock on or lead full, no, they can't. They can't do that. So I said I'm not going to go into like specific rules on sort of the Blackstone that have cool warp cannons if you're Chaos, or Orks, which have the Ork Hulk has specific movement rules, the same as the Kroot War Sphere that has a particular set of rules for it, and so do the rocks, for example. But I will just mention the Ramillies Starfort because it is one of the center points of the game. It is an absolutely monumental piece of resin. And this has a whole section dedicated to its rules in the Yellow Armada book. It is 875 points of absolute glorious imperial beauty. And it has its own set of rules. Ships can dock with it. Each quadrant has its own hit points, and you've got to take each quadrant down to do damage to it. It has a vast array of weapons. It's incredibly powerful. But because it is so expensive, you're only going to be playing with it in large games like the Exterminatus mission or the Planetary Assault mission. And in those scenarios, now you can try and take it in bigger games, but typically in the rules for a Ramillies, you use this instead of the planet on the actual board, and then you can put defensive like these little turrets and orbital docks around it. They got to be away from it, like up to 30 centimeters away. But the specific rules. But it's a hilarious set of rules for it because of the quadrant thing, because ships can dock with it, because they've got a tremendous amount of weapons, but also because it's so expensive, you need to put it in place of a planet to defend it. So hilarious set of rules. Highly recommend you go check these out. The Ramillies. It is a really, really, not only is it just a fantastic model and all that, and it's one of the best kind of looking models that GW I think ever did as a Forge World model. Personally, I know I'm a bit biased, but it has got some really fun rules, and the fact that to be able to cripple it, you've got to kill 2 quadrants, which have health, which is ridiculous. The health on it, I think, on each quadrant is 12, so it's like a battleship on either side. So it's quite a powerful little ship. It can reach out and hit people at 60 centimeters as well with its weapons batteries and its lances. It has its own defensive ordnance as well. So this is a tough. I've never seen one of these actually destroyed. When it gets destroyed, it doesn't. It just breaks apart and kind of sort of thing. But I've never actually seen one in a game get destroyed because it's so hard to kill. I've seen a rock. I've seen an Ork Hulk die. That's got 40 hit points, which has probably got the most hit points in the game. Is it? No, I think that still does. 12, 12, 12, 12. Yeah. So they're about the same, and that's about 600 points for the Ork Hulk. And I have seen one of them die a couple of times, but because of its armor. But this thing is an absolute monster. If you ever get to play with it, please do. It is hilarious, and I'd be remiss not to mention it. So one last thing that I haven't got on the board here because I've misplaced them, and once things go missing in my house with my ships, I've got to go start rummaging through boxes. But mines kind of defenses, they're kind of not, but they are included in the defensive. And you can buy individual orbital mines for 5 points, or you can buy mine fields. And the critical thing with mines is if they move, a mine itself, an individual one, will move 10 centimeters towards an enemy through the game. And if it comes into contact with that ship, it causes 8 hits, which is quite incredible for 5 points. And even if the ship's turret shoots it down, it does 4 attacks instead of the 8. So don't ignore mines. Ignore mines at your peril, is all I'm saying. And just find out mines. You can buy not only just the individual ones, you can buy mine fields, and they block line of sight, and they have I think a D3 times 10 area that you can put them down on. And when you put them down, if a ship comes within 30 centimeters of a minefield, then you then roll a dice to see if the ship has been detected by the minefield, and then a mine goes flying off towards it. So again, if it's detected, again, it's 8 hit points coming at you. And in that instance, it's not necessarily one mine. You roll a d3 to see if multiple mines have detected that ship. Now it blocks line of sight, an orbital minefield, but you can shoot into it as well. You can try and shoot at it with your ships to try and obscure their ability to be able to see your ship. So there's a couple of rolls in relation to that, which you can have a look at on page 143, I think, of the original Blue book. And it goes into a little bit more detail. But if you're worried about points and things like that, and you think orbital mines, really, I think, as well as potentially a defense monitor, are a hilarious way as an aerial denial, because no one wants 8 potential hits coming at them and then multiple mines. But I think a minefield is a good way to aerial denial, sort of, if you want to try and funnel ships a certain way with games. And it's the same with any defenses, I think. I think if you're playing with defenses in general, the ability to put one on the board adds a good defensive platform. And the enemy needs to potentially go through that in certain scenarios, so you are going to be getting some shots in for a period of time. And they are a good, space stations and things like that are a good linchpin. They aren't easy to destroy. They're pretty difficult nuts to crack. And having a squadron of sort of weapons battery or lance silos firing out just adds to that. So they can be a good defensive strong point to try and funnel ships towards, and then you bring your fleet around and you kind of hem them in. Or you can do it, like I said, with an aerial defensive denial such a situation. So having orbital mines and defenses at one location makes your opponent have to go through that to do anything. So they potentially don't want to do that and don't want to go through and risk that sort of danger. So having those mines, having those defensive platforms there, you can then prevent them from going near that side of portion of the board and dictate their movement. And in any war game, if you can dictate the movement and make your opponent move where you kind of want them to move, you're in for a winner. So really good, strong defensive point if you want to hold the line, but also a good aerial denial sort of situation. So 2 really good sort of tactical options for the stationary defenses. Hulk is just a moving thing, and so the Ork Hulks and Kroot, it's just funny just to move them in the game. And a Ramillies, well, no one wants to take one of them on unless you've got a full fleet. Don't ignore a Blackstone. Don't ignore the Blackstone. I'm not a huge fan of the Chaos one. I don't think the warp cannons are particularly great, but the Imperial one, don't ignore it. It's a powerful little piece on the tabletop, and will really make your opponent think if they try and go anywhere near it. So there you have it, Admirals. That is what defences are. Your space stations, your orbital docks, your Blackstone Fortresses, even your hulks, and even a couple of ships like Kroot War Spheres are classed as defences. And there are some special rules around it, as I said. They are a really fun thing to use in your games. I think they add quite a significant amount of narrative flavour. There are specific scenarios in which you can use them, but you can use them in any of your games. And throwing say a Ramillies in instead of, and you're trying to attack the Ramillies rather than necessarily a planet, adds a completely different scope to how you approach that compared to a regular planet. So really good fun to use. Always fun and random to see a Hulk on the table, and I've heard that a recent tournament, a player is taking one of them, which is awesome. Blackstone Fortress, always fun to use, and yeah, making it chaos tainted with the warp cannons could be really interesting and a bit of fun. So don't ignore defenses. They're always fun to include. You can spend points to include them in any of your games, essentially. So yeah, and they throw a little bit of narrative flavour in there and different potential objectives that can be used. So I hope you can give them a go, Admirals. If you have used them, let us know in the comments what you think of them. Have you ever played with like some of these defences, like a Hulk or a Blackstone Fortress in your fleets? Have you ever tried them out? And let me know in the comments, how did it go? As ever, Admirals, please like and subscribe. It's great to see the channel growing and all that, which is great. It's always good to see more Admirals joining the fold and the Admiralty. So until the next video, thank you very much for watching, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one.